It was about 8 a.m. on a cold winter morning. Barron Trump sat by himself, enjoying the company of a book. He had learned that true wisdom was found in good books' pages, and so he had built a necessary daily discipline of reading academic and non-academic literature. While he journeyed in the author's world, he was not completely oblivious to his surroundings. Barron sat at the coffee shop 2 miles from campus, his cup of cream latte completely untouched. Many other student patrons trooped in to grab a drink before heading to school. There was a big event scheduled to happen in school that day. 3 months had passed since Barron started school at New York University, NYU. However, the news about Barron as a student on that campus was just as fresh. Being a Trump meant he had to be at the receiving end of high expectations as much as high criticism, so he was set on being the best version of himself and making a difference. And now, on this campus, he wouldn't do any less. As for critics, he had learned to handle them without disdain, but rather with understanding and respect. Everyone has a story that deserves to be heard, so he listened well and understood before speaking. That's if he spoke at all. Barron didn't choose this life. None of us get to choose how we're born, a petite female student said. The other two, with her, aired their objective and supportive opinions as they made their way to a table. This happened to be 2 tables away from Barron's. However, their voices were loud enough for him to hear. He may not have chosen to be born this way, but he can choose how he goes about his life. Why then does he act like he's better than all of us? The guy with them said. If he acts that way, then I haven't noticed, the second girl, a blonde, responded, shrugging her shoulders carefreely. He rarely takes part in extracurricular activities. Take today's debate, for instance, like it's beneath him or something, the guy retorted. The debate doesn't begin until 10 o'clock. How do you know he's not participating? They continued their banter. Barron had already known that there were different opinions about him amongst the students at NYU, so this conversation wasn't a surprise to him. His mother told him he was not like the other kids his age. His life was different for many reasons, a chief reason being the last name he answered. He blurred the conversation into background noise as he continued reading his book. If he must stand out, then uncommon wisdom must guide him. 30 minutes had passed, and it was time for him to leave the coffee shop. While he put his things together and stood up to leave, he noticed that the students discussing earlier had also left the shop. Whether within or outside the class, Barron always maintained a charismatic presence about him and a controlled demeanor. This made him stand out even when he was not speaking. That day, the school would have an in-house debate among students across the various departments and faculties. Thus, the classes were rescheduled. They only had to submit some assignments to follow after the debate. Ordinarily, Barron had not opted to participate. He preferred to listen more than to speak, and he only spoke when he felt it was necessary. Barron had read through the proposed topics for the debates the night before. He had his facts together and understood both sides well. However, he had decided to allow other students the opportunity to speak. He concluded that he would not speak unless he gauged that it was necessary. There was still an hour left before the time of the debate, and students were already making their way to the large arena. While some participating students were doing their last-minute preparations, others were out to secure good sitting positions. Barron was also making his way to the arena an hour early. He had been contemplating whether or not to participate in the debate. The participants for each topic and each side had already been predetermined. However, there was an opening where he could speak, the open session of the debate. During this session, the student who won the last open session could make a presentation of any topic of their choosing and make an invitation for another with a counter-opinion. Many students prefer focusing on their premeditated debate topics rather than participating in the spontaneous session. This was because the students who usually won open debate sessions were known for extraordinary competence in presenting and defending arguments. Barron was never one to seek attention. However, his presence alone commanded it, not to mention his name and the ideas people had about his family. He mentally reasserted his decision from the night before that he would not speak unless necessary, and that would be in the open session. Whilst awaiting the start of the event, he resorted to reading again. This time, it was the school's publication. He had picked it on his way to the arena. He was focused on the part that contained controversial opinions and suggestions from students. He wasn't taken aback or irritated by some of the things captured. He rather felt that they didn't know any better. Putting down the publication he had been reading, he noticed that the arena was almost full of students. The debate was about to start, and the audience soon settled as the protocols that preceded it rolled out. The arena was filled with passionate discussions and arguments. The judging panel nodded away and took notes of points to ascertain the students' performance. The first half of the NYU in-house debate followed the Oxford-style debate format, and the teams were paired on a particular topic. One team proposed a motion, while the other opposed it. Motions were centered around specific policy resolution. Some teams argued for, while others argued against, presenting evidence-based arguments and refutations. Time passed swiftly, ending the first session of the debate. The judging panel compiled the points and the final results, while the open session was to commence. Professor Jake Robbins had earlier declared the focus of the open session as the place of policies that protect social rights and advance political inclusion. This was based on one of the arguments from the first session. The idea was to seal the first session and prepare for the next session. The focus was announced 10 minutes earlier to allow the students a short time to brainstorm ideas for their presentation. Barron had been deeply focused on the entire debate, almost like he was in a class. Thus, ideas flooded his mind, which he had already enriched with valuable insight and information. The student who had won the last open session debate made his way to the podium upon the announcement and invitation of Professor Jakes. He was cheered on by the students with a round of applause as he made his way. Alex Turner is a renowned liberal student with extraordinary comprehension and argument prowess. A student seated behind Barron said to another, "His reputation precedes him. I wonder if anyone would oppose him his time." Barron observed quietly, while reminding himself to speak only if necessary. He believed having an opinion didn't mean one should always air them. The need of the situation should always be analyzed before one speaks. So he kept his cool until something struck him. Alex Turner mounted the podium wearing a smug look and a proud smile as he adjusted the microphone. His presence bore an aura of icy pride, which matched his perfectly dyed white hair. Confident in his ability and ideologies, he began boldly as he spoke into the microphone. After observing the salutation protocol, he continued, "Fellow students of NYU, speaking on progressive policies for a better future, we must understand how this applies to us," he said with feigned sympathy. "The younger generation of every community constitutes the future. For America, we are that future." Nods of affirmation were seen from the students in the arena. His captivating start earned him approval from the students just minutes into his presentation. "The policies enacted affect the younger generation much more than the older. We have more of life ahead of us, while they've had more behind them. How can we talk about progressive policies without addressing the regressive policies by which we're bound? Progress is not possible while retrogression is the order of the day. Before we can explore the possibilities of progressive policies for the betterment of the future, our future, we must, of necessity, address the policies that are holding us back." The hall was silent, with everyone paying rapt attention. How can outdated beliefs and policies govern a modern, evolving society? There could never be progression in such a society. Alex was dropping sentence after sentence, heading for a peak where he would encapsulate one sentence with a bombshell. The crowd was eerily quiet as they waited for him to hit home and bring all that he'd been saying to a point they could agree and cheer. The atmosphere grew even more tense as he continued. "Policies are meant for the progression of societies, the better of the people, but when policies are regressive, the outcome would be the opposite of what is supposed. And who is to blame? Who do we pitch the blame on when we're faced and even overcome by some of the consequences of these regressive policies?" He paused for effect, looking around the hall before answering his question. "Leadership. Stale, outdated leadership. They make the policies but live above it so it never affects them." His voice carried a hint of despair as he tried to make his presentation emotionally enthralling. Slight murmurs of agreement were building among the students within the arena. Leaders who have lived the most of their lives behind them, but still want to exert control over the future generations. Our real challenges are thinking patterns, sponsored actions, and policies. If we must make any progress, we must break free of their control over our lives and destinies. The arena erupted with cheers and supporting applause. Alex's confidence was boosted even more by the obvious support of the student crowd. With a renewed gush of adrenaline, he continued his attack. "If we must make progress, then we must rid our systems and our future of the control of stale leadership." More cheers and whistles of approval followed. "We can achieve this by what I call the young liberal blood leadership." There was silence again. "If we were free from retrogression, then we would need more liberal and young leaders in places of leadership, away with stale, outdated, binding laws sponsored by religious bigots. I propose that a progressive law be set to lower the age limit of political participation and office occupancy to 16, and assert an upper age limit of 60 to restrict the same." The arena became turbulent with students' uproar, with the majority agreeing, while a few disagreed with his proposition. The faces of the judging panel members and the moderating professor expressed their concern as they stared at one another. But Alex was not done speaking. "That's not all," he said, the noise reducing slightly. "We also need that policy to make allowance for trans individuals to hold political positions and participate in major office. They reserve their rights of equality. After all, they have experienced the perks and cons that come with both genders, so they know and can decide better." The arena went wild with his last statement. He had to scream literally into the microphone to make his closing point. Yes, to progressive laws for young liberal blood in politics. With this, he stepped a few feet back from the podium, and the moderating professor stepped forward. "Decorum in the arena," he said firmly. "We are approaching the end of the open session debate." The arena became quieter as he spoke. "Mr. Alex Turner has made a proposition. Is there anyone with a counter-argument?" A sudden hush fell upon the arena as everyone looked around and listened for any opposition against Alex Turner. Although his last points, which surmised his proposition, were very controversial, not many wanted to challenge him to it. His last two statements led the arena into a wild uproar and incited criticism and support. However, only a few persons could stand up against a renowned liberalist who could articulate and deliver his points and rebuttals with accurate precision and sometimes in attacking statements. No one wanted to be tagged as regressive or religious. The hall had become almost as silent as a graveyard as everyone waited for someone to say something. The moderator picked up the bell to declare the end of the open session. Little did he know that it was far from over. Alex Turner smiled triumphantly as he saw Professor Jakes reach for the moderating bell. He had already pictured himself emerging as the winner of the open session for this in-house debate season. Professor Jakes, with the bell in hand, looked up once more. He looked round, spotted a hand raised, and a voice followed. A bold, commanding voice said, "I have a counter-argument." At this, everyone turned in his direction as he made his way to the podium at the center of the arena. His steps were unhurried, calculated, and smart at the same time. Murmurs erupted from all corners as students began to comment and question what was about to go down. Barron Trump, the elite son of the president, was going to counter the proposition of the renowned liberal student debater. Barron Trump had observed the presentation and proposition of the liberal student. He could see how much wisdom was lacking. It was easy to tell that there was a deficiency in the basic understanding of the policies he mentioned and the understanding of what progressive policies were all about. Alex capitalized on emotional and sentimental methods to deliver his opinionated points. And while Barron had not wanted to speak up, he saw the necessity. He judged that it would be unfair for him to watch the students be swayed with baseless ideologies without properly knowing what they were accepting to stand for. He saw the need to expound on certain points and to lend some wisdom. After much internal analysis and contemplation, Barron agreed to counter Alex's proposition. He saw the alarming need for it and raised his hand, saying he had a counter-argument. Little did he know that a vicious confrontation awaited him. Alex's presentation was the nicest he could be at debates. His rebuttals always came with forceful attacks, personal or otherwise. As Barron made his way to the podium, Alex smirked sardonically, while Professor Jake dropped the bell and stepped aside. As Barron mounted the podium, he gave Alex an approving nod and a friendly smile. Alex was confused for a bit. He had expected raw defiance and cold opposition, but Barron only exuded warmth and charisma. Adjusting the microphone to fit his height, Barron smiled respectfully as he observed the salutation procedure. Then he began calmly, articulately, his confidence and charisma sending invisible ripples across the arena. Alex had been rooted to a spot, lost in shock as Barron joined him on the stage. It was not until Barron began speaking that he regained himself. "Fellow students at NYU, allow me to bring some clarity to the points mentioned by Mr. Alex and a justified counter-argument." Everyone held their breath in suspense as he continued. "That was a brilliant presentation, Alex, I must admit." Alex had begun to smirk proudly when Barron added, "However, clearly stated facts are the basis of any argument. Sentiments and emotions are rather unstable." This wiped the too-soon smile from Alex's face as Barron continued. "Like you had rightly said, we are the future of America because we are young. However, no future can stand without the foundation laid by the past. This is a fact you seem to have ignored," Barron stated. "The policies enacted affect both the young and the old, bearing in mind the interest of future implication. Saying that policies only affect the younger generation is rather inaccurate. One must consider how various policies affect various age groups before concluding. Everyone possesses the right to live. We don't have a greater right to live than they do. These older folks you refer to are families to younger folks, including yourself, and have made significant contributions to the nation." A new sense of reasoning was starting to dawn in the arena, as previously cheering students sat in thoughtful silence. Progressive policies are not built by tearing down the policies that existed before, but by understanding the reasons and reasoning behind them. It is only by this understanding that progress can be attained. Anyone who has not understood the reason and idea behind a thing does not possess or reserve the right to criticize it. Turning to Alex, he said, "You can't walk up to Professor Jake or Dr. Allen and criticize their research findings or even teaching curricula without studying them yourself to understand why they appear the way they do. Ignorance cannot teach knowledge. Rather, the reverse is the case. How can you claim to have better policy ideas without an adequate understanding of the ones that existed before and the reasoning behind them? That is hypocritical. While claiming to support progress, you are making a rather retrogressive suggestion that tears down centuries-old reasoning and the wisdom that have built our great nation." Barron was driving his points home, and for the first time, Alex's face appeared as though he was absorbing understanding. How could teenagers who have barely gotten a clear picture of what they want to do with their lives be trusted to handle the affairs of a whole nation, while trained patriots who have made immense sacrifices and contributions to our nation be sidelined? Does that not violate social rights of inclusivity? Barron questioned Alex's reasoning, albeit in a respectful and sincerely curious tone. "Reports have shown that the teenage period and adolescence are the most unstable phases of life. Do you expect governing rules and governance to be provided in that instability? Factually unreasonable, I must say." The beliefs and policies you refer to as outdated are the foundations for the country and economic system you now enjoy. They built and preserved the nation we see and have today. Seeking to break free from the guiding influence of leaders like those we have now is like a dog wanting to be free from its leash as its caretaker walks him through a strange neighborhood. Think about that for a moment. What would happen to such a dog is that it would wander in confusion, get exhausted, and eventually seek the guidance of its caretaker again, having learnt from experience that only one with superior experience and farther foresight can guide another. Barron paused for effect and stared around the arena. He had been speaking without any interruptions or even cheers from the crowd. However, he continued, assumption is the least form of knowledge. Thus, assuming that the audience understands something you haven't clearly explained to them is like expecting a crawling child to begin walking without first holding their hands to practice with them. Facts make for intelligent intellectual arguments rather than sentiment. The policies you have tagged as regressive contain intricacies aimed at protecting American citizens' lives and interests. However, if you have not studied them well, how can you make an audience understand? Barron said, rather sympathetically. All that I have said in counter-arguments is based on logic and reasoning rather than on the details of policies. If I bring a counter-argument to you on policies, then it's only fair that I allow you to study and understand them well enough to oppose or support. Preying on your ignorance wouldn't make me superior but rather petty. So, Alex and my fellow students, I hope I have been able to open your eyes to how much you don't know. I hope to stir up your desire to study and research better before accepting ideologies. I do not seek to win an argument, but rather to bring you to a point of understanding, and I hope I have been able to do that. Barron nodded and smiled slightly as he added into the microphone, thank you. The arena, which had been in captivating silence for about half an hour, suddenly erupted with loud applause, and some students even stood on their feet as an ovation. Barron calmly addressed Alex's points with logic and reason, without demeaning remarks or comments. The audience had watched in awe as Barron expertly navigated the debate, never once losing his composure or respectful tone. He turned to Alex, smiled warmly, and offered a handshake. The stunned Alex, who had been speechless for the most part, surprisingly reached out for a hug. His single action conveyed respect and acceptance of superior opinions and skills. What do you think about Barron's approach to the debate? What are your ideas and opinions? Share them in the comment section. If this video was inspiring, like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Also, turn on the notification bell to receive notifications about new posts. Before you go, watch the other videos displayed on your screen. See you next time.